This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
Another edition of Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend is underway, and tonight we will present thousands of runners competing in the 10K race in the nation's capital. Thank you for joining us for our live coverage on Rogers TV. We're looking forward to seeing elite runners and amateur athletes in tonight's competition. I'm Mark Sutcliffe, joined once again by Tim Hutchings, British Olympian and longtime commentator at major events around the world. And Tim, great to have you back. You've been with us before. You've been away the last couple of years, but I'm really happy to be working with you again as we present the 10K tonight.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I've been AWOL for a couple of years now, I guess, but it's great to be back, and conditions are really good. We know this is a super fast course for the 10K guys in particular. Tomorrow's marathon has a few lumps and bumps, but this course is really quick, and conditions are just about perfect. There's a bit of damp in the air, but no wind whatsoever. It's dead flat. Really looking forward to it.
We were worried that there was going to be a lot of rain today, and there has been some, and you can see there are umbrellas up, and it is overcast, but it's about 16 degrees in Ottawa, and so that's not too hot. We've had warmer temperatures, certainly for the 10K. With the sun setting so late at this time of year, we're really just 3.5 weeks away from the longest day of the year. So with warm temperatures more typical at this time of May, we've had it hot for the 10K. That's not the case today. These are milder conditions, and for most of the runners, I think they'll take it.
Yeah, I think it was sweltering in 2016, wasn't it? You know, and tonight it's a little on the cool side. Sitting here in a short sleeve shirt, it's not ideal, but actually for running conditions, these are just about perfect temperatures. You know, marathon runners like it even cooler. They like sort of 8-10 degrees centigrade, but here is 16. Pretty much spot on.
Yeah, you can see the start line on your screens right now, and it is a bit of a different start line and a bit of a different course from past editions of the race because there's construction in downtown Ottawa. The 10K race in the past has started very close to Elgin Street, and there's been a portion that has been run on Elgin Street. That won't be the case tonight because of construction there. So instead, the runners are starting on Colonelby Drive on one side of the historic Rideau Canal in downtown Ottawa, and they will travel all along the Rideau Canal, crossing over on the Bronson Bridge and come back on the Queen Elizabeth Drive side of the canal all the way into the finish line where Tim and I are located. And we expect the race to begin in about 25 minutes from now, give or take. We'll tell you a little bit about the women's start for the 10K in a moment, but here's our schedule for this weekend. The men's and women's 10K tonight, and then tomorrow we will present the men's and women's marathon, the kids marathon, and the start of the half marathon. Our coverage will begin tomorrow morning at 6:30. We look forward to sharing that marathon with you tomorrow and all of the other events that are going on. The women's race tonight is going to start at 6:26:20. The men will start, the elite women, and then the elite men and the rest of the field will start at 6:30. We'll tell you more a little bit about that gender challenge that happens every year at the 10K. It is one of the unique and fascinating and exciting aspects of this race. We'll tell you more about that coming up in just a moment. As part of our coverage, we are joined by elite Canadian runner Tanya Jones and our own Timothy Walker. Let's go to them now.
I'm here the excitement is gathering, and the runners starting to line up. The elites are already here. And speaking of elites, I mean, Tanya Jones, I'm feeling a little intimidated right now. One of the most accomplished runners in Canadian history. What are the athletes thinking right now? Like, how are the elites really getting their minds around this?
I think that it's just a matter of actually being very calm at this point. There's a lot of excitement around. You can hear the noise, you can feel the energy. It's so exciting. But I think everyone needs to focus on their specific race, feel prepared, get warmed up, and stay calm.
Okay. So, obviously something that you mastered because you've got a whole lot of hardware at home to prove that. And your son was in the 5K.
Yeah, we've had a fun morning. As folks know, there's a 2K and a 5K race that goes earlier, even before the 10K gets rolling this evening. So yeah, my two boys actually ran. One ran the 2K and one ran the 5. It was great fun.
Okay, so there's going to be this exciting race of the elite women who are going to start, and then the elite men have to catch them. So that's one of the highlights, and you and I are going to race to you and I are not going to race. I'm not racing you ever.
I'm not going to do it either.
Which elites are you really keeping your eye on, particularly that are Canadian?
Yeah, the focus in the Canadian women, I'm really excited about Natasha Wieck out of Vancouver, Jessica O'Connell out of Calgary. Now, they've both been away training at altitude together, and apparently are feeling really good and really fit. So I actually think they'll be able to challenge the international field that's here today. Pretty exciting.
What about, I mean, you were an elite Canadian athlete, but, some of the stories that touch me the most that, we see here, not necessarily in the first corral, but are some of the people in the last corrals. As an athlete, what do you think about that?
Well, I think this is one of the rare sports where we can have that experience at the back of the pack or as an elite and share a common experience of the challenge of preparing for a race and then, trying to bring out our best on race day.
On the other side of the canal, this was sort of a temporary start because of construction on Elgin, and routes were changed because of flooding. But there's so many people over there cheering. Does that actually really help you at the end?
Definitely, but what's really exciting about Ottawa is the support in the city through the entire course. So it's never just the finish line. It's all the hardest points are the halfway mark, the last couple kilometers, and Ottawa always comes out to support the races.
Okay, well, it's always exciting to see. It's starting to rain here. Timing really not that great, but we're prepared, and we'll be back to you later with all the excitement, particularly the men against the women of the fastest people on the planet.
All right, thank you, Timothy, and thank you, Tanya. I have a really good story to tell about Tanya Jones because 10 years ago last night at Ottawa Race Weekend, Tanya's family, my wife and I went out for dinner, and my wife was pregnant at the time. We went for dinner at a restaurant in downtown Ottawa on Elgin Street, Johnny Farina's restaurant. We had a nice meal. My wife and I went home, and in the middle of the night, my wife woke me up and said, I think we have to go to the hospital. And a few hours later, my son Jack was born. So today is my son Jack's 10th birthday, and it all happened right after we had dinner with Tanya and her family here at Ottawa Race Weekend. So happy birthday, Jack, and thanks for the nice memory, Tanya. It's great to be working with Tanya again, as we have so many times over the years at Ottawa Race Weekend.
Could be a bit of a theme, Mark. I've got a pregnancy story about one of the elite ladies. Broke a world record a couple of years ago when a few weeks pregnant, unbeknown to her. And then she, guess what, didn't race for 18 months.
Right. Kind of like Serena Williams winning the Australian Open a couple of years ago when she was a few weeks pregnant as well. So we have a different course for the 10K, but we do have bonuses if the runners set an event record. It won't be a course record because the course is different, but it would be an event record. So let's look at the event records for this Ottawa 10K. So Dariba Murga in 2009 ran 27:24 on the men's side, and many people will remember John Halverson, who is the race director and president of Run Ottawa, who's leading the organization for a final time at this year's event before he goes back to a job in the high-tech sector. He held the course record for 20 years, 28 minutes and 12 seconds. It's been broken a few times since then, but the current record, 27:24. 1:54. The women's record was set just 4 years ago. Gladys Chirona of Kenya, 30 minutes and 56 seconds. So we'll see if those times are under threat tonight. It is a very flat course. There is basically one rise in the course, and that is when the runners go over the Bronson Bridge at about the halfway point, and then they descend back along the canal. But otherwise, it's canal side running, so very flat course. Not a lot of turns in the course, which the elite runners prefer. They don't like there to be a lot of turns. So the conditions are favorable, and again, it is not too hot. Tim, we should talk a little more about this dynamic of the gender race that they set up. I really like this, and I know a lot of the spectators do too. There will be a men's race and a women's race. There's prize money for the top men and the top women, all the way down to 8th place. The winner of each field receives $5,000, but then there's another $2,000 in prize money for the athlete that crosses the line first. And the women get a 3-minute and 40-second head start. And what that does is it sets up a race not only amongst the women and amongst the men, but between the top woman and the top man over who's going to cross first.
I love it. I mean, it's kind of a virtual race because, of course, by the time the men start, the women will have gone through 1 kilometre. They'll be, more than half a mile down the road. But actually, it does throw in a different dynamic. It gives them all an incentive to go out pretty hard from the gun. And funnily enough, I was in Bangalore, India last Sunday, commentating on a big 10K there, and the women, in their own separate race, separate start time from the guys, set off at a dawdle. They jogged the first 8 or 9 kilometres, then sprinted like heck for the last kilometre. And it was kind of anticlimactic because you're trying to cover the race and say nice things about these elite athletes, but they'd made up their mind not to go out hard. The guys, in contrast, went out really hard, ran a sub-28 time, which is fast, and if there'd been a gender challenge there, the guys would have swallowed up the ladies very, very quickly.
And so what it does is it sets up this race among the races, and we've seen it very close some years. It's come right down to the wire a couple of times. There have been chases down the final couple of 100 meters with the lead male athlete chasing down the lead female athlete, and it just adds that little extra dimension to it, especially if one of the women, for example, has broken away from the pack of female athletes. It means that she's got another race still to run, even if she's won the women's race with a few 100 meters to go.
Makes it doubly tough, actually, because the leading lady, having got clear of her rivals, still needs to be looking over her shoulder in case there's a guy coming up behind her going considerably quicker. So I love that extra factor thrown into the mix. Just makes it a little bit more complicated, a little bit more exciting.
And I have to say, there's only one way to structure it, of course, and that's to have the women go first. But I'd rather be in the position of chasing, being the person chasing than the person being chased, right? Where you can see the person in front of you that you're trying to run down, as opposed to looking over your shoulder wondering if they're catching up to you.
It's a very tough one. It's a handicap race. I've run 1 or 2 of those on the track about 100 years ago, and they're great fun. But in here, on the track race, when you have a handicap, you can see the guys in front of you 50 yards, 70 yards in front of you if it's a mile race or whatever. Here, the ladies are starting 3 minutes 40 before the men. The men, when they go off, the ladies will be long out of sight, so it's tougher in a way to gauge their effort. But for sure, it sort of semi-guarantees that both fields, women and men, will go off very hard from the gun.
For many years here at Ottawa Race Weekend, the elite athlete field has been coordinated by a terrific volunteer named Manny Rodriguez, and he's standing by now with our Timothy Walker. Timothy?
So, just as it starts to rain, Manny Rodriguez is the man responsible for bringing all of the elites here for this race, people from all over the world. I know you're not a betting man, but who are you keeping an eye on as the elite men and the elite women race against each other to the finish line?
Well, I think it's going to be some fantastic races. It really is hard to pick. For the women, there are 4 Kenyan women who I think are really strong. I'd maybe give it to Perez, but I think, any of them can pull it through. In the men's, Moses Tibet, I think, is probably the favorite, but the Moroccans are really good, so I think it's going to be great racing.
What about Canadian racing?
Canadian racing, in the men, I think Justin Kent's got a definite advantage there. In the women's, it's going to be a really close race between Natasha, Lodac, and Jessica O'Connell. That'll be a fantastic race to watch.
That's really, kind of the legend versus, the new one on the scene, right? And that, there's been this long long history with Natasha of, injuries and heartbreak, and now she's got this young whippersnapper chasing her down.
I know, but she's in great shape. She ran a fabulous 10,000 meters earlier this month, so I'm really hoping that she pulls a really good one, and maybe we'll see a new Canadian record. That would be fabulous.
Yeah, and the time has come for her. In the news conference, right, she made that joke about, she is 37. What are you going to do about it? So just explain for people who haven't seen this before, you're giving the women a head start. To explain this race.
It's a gender gap race where what we do is we give the women a head start, but we give prize money based on who finishes first. So the men are given 3 minutes and 40 seconds behind the women, and the idea is whoever reaches gets prize money, and it's usually a great race between the two because the women are running scared and the men are trying to hunt them down, but it's a great gap to close.
We've seen some women nail it, though, in the past.
Yes, it's actually, we did a look back, and in the past years, 5 women have won and 4 men, so it's been very close, and I don't know how it's going to go this year.
It's always one of those things that amazes me is at the finish line how out of gas an athlete can be because they've given it their all. And I remember one year when a woman won, she barely made it 2 more feet past the finish line. It really shows that mind over body experience.
So that woman was Perez Jepchachir, who is back here today.
And she's a new mom, right?
She is a new mom, yes.
Yeah.
So.
Imagine the training that takes to get back into championship style. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, well, you picked a really good group this year, a really nice group of people. They were great to talk to on Friday.
They're a great group, and I'm hoping that the weather holds and we have a great race.
All right, well, we're out here anyway. Thank you, Manny. Okay, back to you.
There is a light rain that is falling at the Ottawa 10K, but it's not too intense. We had worried a little bit about the threat of thunderstorms today. We don't seem to have had that, and I don't think the runners will mind a little bit of precipitation, especially once they start moving. It's not going to interfere too much with their running, I don't think.
No, I mean, actually, rain in your face and on your head without wind is not really the issue. It's the slippery road surface, which can be a factor, and certainly quite a lot of athletes in races in the past have complained that they just couldn't get purchase despite the quality of their running shoes and the cost of those running shoes. So we'll have to see. I don't think it's wet enough to really cause a problem, Mark, and I'm still going to go with what I said earlier, that I think conditions are pretty much perfect.
All right, let's take a look at the elite men's field that has been assembled for the Ottawa 10K. Tim, what can you tell us about some of these athletes? We've already heard Manny talk about Moses Kibet and some of the Moroccan runners, a couple of best friends who are running in this event together. So quite a deep field.
It is a strong field, yeah, and the Moroccans have come here in force because they've run well here before. Kachir there is a 26-year-old. He's run 27.50 for 10,000 metres. Anything under 28 minutes is a world class. So 27.50, very, very strong indeed. Likewise, El Arabi there, his compatriot, who will be tough here today. I think the Kenyans, though, with their very experienced Wilfred Kimitai, for example, has been around a long time, 34. He's only run 28.02, but that could be good enough to win. And interestingly, he's got a very strong track background. And I always like to hedge my bets for the guys who have got track pedigree, with that racing instinct on the track at 5,000 and 10,000 and the raw speed that they can bring to the roads, particularly over 10K, less so with a marathon. It can be a really decisive factor.
All right, let's take a look at the finish from last year. This is the 2018 Ottawa 10K, and you can see that at this point in the lead is Alia Mohammed of the United Arab Emirates. She is the lead woman, but she's overtaken here in the final few hundred meters by Adamlak Berta of Ethiopia, who is the men's winner, and he finishes the race in 27 minutes and 48 seconds to capture the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend. Big, strong finish here for Berta.
Yeah, 27.48 on the roads is top notch. I mean, the course record is 27.24 by Dariba Merga, his compatriot, an Ethiopian, back in 2009. But that is really strong running. He looks good. He obviously had that incentive to chase down the top lady. And look at that. He looks pretty easy crossing the line there. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the moment from last year, and you could see the sunshine last year at Ottawa Race Weekend. We do expect pretty favorable conditions for tomorrow morning for the marathon, the half marathon, and the kids marathon. It's not expected to rain tomorrow, the last time I checked the forecast anyway. It is expected to be relatively cool at the start, so the conditions should be pretty good for the marathon tomorrow. You're looking at the start line now of the Ottawa 10K, and in about 7 minutes from now we expect the elite women's field to start, and then 3 minutes and 40 seconds after that the elite men and the rest of the field. About 8,500 runners participating in the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend, among 31,000 or so runners who are participating in all of the events that are happening this weekend. As was mentioned earlier, 2K, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, kids marathon, and then there are also some challenges where you can combine events from today and tomorrow and get an additional medal as well. Why don't we take a look now at the elite women's field and talk a little bit about Perez Jepchirchir and some of the other elite women who are going to be racing today, Tim.
Yeah, Perez, delightful young lady, 24 years old. Her best is 30 minutes 55. Anything under 31 minutes puts you in a pretty rare group. She was world champion for the half marathon back in 2016 in Cardiff in the UK, in Wales, of course, in 67 minutes. And she then went on this blitz at half marathon, winning one race after another for the following year or so, culminating in that world record in February 2017, where she was a few weeks pregnant. She ran 65.06. That's a pretty good time for a guy at the half marathon. But she's just coming back now to full fitness. She says she's not the finished article, but nearly.
And Natasha Lodac, who's not on this list, but is a top-notch Canadian runner who, as Timothy mentioned, has battled through some injuries. And Tanya alluded to the fact that she's been training at altitude in the past few months. I spoke with her not so long ago about that. Here are some of the women who will be competing. Natasha Lodac, of course, has the record for the 10,000 meters. She competed in the Olympics in 2016 in Rio, and she's the second fastest Canadian 10-kilometer runner ever with the personal best of 31:59, which she ran here in 2015. So she's someone to watch in the Canadian race.
Yeah, Natasha, for sure. I mean, she ran a great 10,000 on the track in the USA at Stanford, California, just 3 weeks ago. So that was 31:43. She's clearly in very, very good shape. You know, again, I like the fact she says that age is just a number. You know, 37, you look after yourself, your mid to late 30s, you can be absolutely world class. I'll never forget back in the day, like when I was running, Carlos Lopez won the Olympic marathon title, Portuguese fellow, at the age of 37. So if you're looking after your legs well, there's nothing wrong with being way north of 35 even.
Yeah, and this is, by the way, the Canadian Championship for the 10K for men and women. So there is a race that is going on among the Canadian women and the Canadian men for the title, and there is prize money for that as well. The top Canadian woman will receive $3,000. The top Canadian man will receive $3,000. Here's a look at the men's field.
Yeah, again, it'll be a very tough competition between the top Canadians. They will be a little way behind, most of these fellas behind the super international elite. But I mean, I had lunch with Chris Balestrini, a triathlete who is now focusing more and more on running, and he's got big potential. I think it should be quite a dust-up between him and Justin Kent. Pretty similar on paper. Tristan Woodfine as well is a good athlete to watch out for. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that race, and hopefully we can cover it, even if they are a minute or two back from the very front end.
Right. So we will be watching to see who the first Canadians are to cross the finish line, because there is the national title and some prize money at stake for that. Where are the runners? You see, we can see in some of our start line pictures that there are runners who are kind of on the course side of the start line, who are just loosening up a bit. For a 10K race, how much warming up do you do before an event like this?
Well, these guys and gals warm up every day for track sessions or hill sessions, their interval sessions, you know, apart from doing just steady runs. So when I used to run, I could not look at my watch, and my warm-up would take 40 minutes, within about 30 seconds of 40 minutes. So you get great reinforcement from having a routine. So you do that same routine, whether it's a warm-up for a track session, maybe slightly different for a race, but not much different. And so they'll be very comfortable with what they're doing. They will have started about 40 minutes ago, I suspect, and just got themselves nice and loose and warm. And when your blood temperature rises slightly, it absorbs more oxygen. That's the reason you have to warm up.
So that's why you warm up physically, but I suspect it's as much about the mental preparation and doing things that are familiar and getting into that mind space that you need to be in to race effectively, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got to have a pretty good plan for the race. My old coach used to say to me, have a plan A for your race, a plan B, and even a plan C. So nothing comes up and sort of slaps you in the face as a shock when the strategy of other people is applied on the road surface. Be ready for almost anything in effect.
And there is a lot of thinking that goes on in these races, and it is not just physical. It's not just about running as fast as you can for around 30 minutes. There's a lot of strategy. There is a lot of mental element to this, and we were hearing from Natasha Lodac about that just the other day when she was saying that she feels she's smarter now. She takes a smarter approach to racing, and she knows when to push and when to pull back. And there are elements of that. You have to know when to make your move. There's a military flyover that's happening as we speak here, just before the race begins. But there is that mental side of the race that you have to be mindful of as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And Natasha has got the confidence from having got it right so many times in recent years. She's had her fair share of injuries, but let's not forget she's an Olympic finalist at 10,000 meters. She's been there and done it, and that experience gives her enormous confidence before the gun goes off. So there she is, right centre of picture in the all black strip, Natasha Lodac, and she's certainly the favourite amongst the local athletes. If she can mix it with the best of the East Africans, I would be absolutely delighted for her. Certainly she's got a chance.
Yeah. All right, the women are lining up at the start line. You can see that red line across the road. That is the start line for the Ottawa 10K. For all of the amateur runners in this race, their chips will be measured as they start the race. Okay, so that's not the start line. They're moving up to the start line now. There's kind of a double line there because of the chip marking system, the chip timing system that is used to record every runner's time. And you can see the elite women's field that is going to get underway in the next 10 seconds, we expect. 3 minutes and 40 seconds ahead of the elite men. So the women are ready to go. Here we go. The Ottawa 10K women's race is underway. The elite women have begun to run down Colonel By Drive in Ottawa.
And Mark, it'll be fascinating to see if they do go out really hard, the East Africans in particular, who to the right of that group as we see it look to have been fairly timid in the first few seconds of the race, because if they go out slowly, if these first 3 or 5 minutes, if they don't really hit the straps, that gives the guys a chance. And I don't know if there'll be any feedback to the fellas that, in the ideal world they would hear the 1 kilometre split of the ladies, and if it's not quick, then that will give them a little bit of extra hope in their hearts when their gun goes in about 3 minutes time from now.
Yeah, and there is a vehicle that is close to the elite athletes, both the men and the women, and I think there are people typically shouting out split times to them so they know how fast they're going. They have their watches as well, but in a 10K race, of course, you're not going to see the runners looking at their watches very often in a 10K race, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the course record here is very, 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 very strong. And I shouldn't say course record, I should say event record, because of that slight adjustment to the circuit they're going to run. But, if they head for 31 minutes, these ladies, around that, then they need to be getting through 1 kilometre in 3:06. There are kilometre markers, so we'll try and keep you abreast of those kilometre splits. But it doesn't look to me like they've gone out particularly quickly. I have to say, tough to tell exactly, Mark, without any direct feedback on the road surface, no distance markers yet, but I don't think they've gone out hard.
It's a big group of runners sticking together at the start as well, which can often be a sign that nobody is pushing the boundaries too much.
Well, no, that's exactly right. But, one thing's for sure is that these Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes, and they are strong, and make no mistake, they should be a minute or so quicker than the best of the Canadians. I would love Natasha Lodac to really hang in there and battle it out with them. But they are very aware of that gender challenge bonus. At the press conference yesterday, Perez Jepchirchir made a point of saying, I won here in 2016, and she said with great pride, I won the gender challenge as well. It's another few $1,000. I mean, it's not to be sniffed at. So that will be in the back of their minds.
In about a minute from now, just over a minute from now, the elite men and the rest of the field will start. And it's worth pointing out that for thousands of runners, this is a big accomplishment. Running 10 kilometers, many of them will be doing it for the very first time in their lives, having trained for weeks, if not months, to be in this position, to be at the start line of the Ottawa 10K and to complete this race today. So it's a personal achievement and a milestone for so many runners, and we want to congratulate all of them today. There's so much to be proud of at an event like that, at an event like this, where runners are achieving really something special personally. Many of them raising money for a particular cause, many of them recovering from an illness, or in some cases people who have just taken up running late in life. I was talking to somebody on the way to the race today who hasn't run at Ottawa Race Weekend for 15 years and is really excited to be doing it again. Here we go. We're going to go to the start now and watch as the men get ready to start, the elite men and the rest of the field. There is the start line for the full field. In the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend, it is now underway. Look at all those runners. Huge group of elite runners at the front of the field. You can see the Canadian Kent wearing the blue shirt at the front of the field. And in behind them, thousands of amateur runners. We expect about 8,500 or so, who will finish in anywhere from 35 minutes to an hour and 45, maybe even 2 hours in the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend.
It is all about participating, isn't it? You can't win if you're not in, and that's for the elite, a little chant for them. But for the rest of the mark here, it's just an achievement for many of them to get round. You know, whether it's a 10K, a half marathon, or a marathon, it's great to see so many people out there. And you know, running is still booming. I mean, it's been a big sport in the Western world for many years. But of course, as you and I both know well, it's growing enormously in China. It's exploding in India. The sport of road racing is going nuts. And there's 1.3 billion people in India. They reckon that there's about 1 million Indians who are jogging regularly, running regularly, and they reckon that's about 2% of the potential participation. So India is coming, believe me, and they're going to find some big talent there.
We can already see that Moses Kibet is in the lead on the men's side, along with Abdurrahmani Kachir. So those two runners, who we expected to be at the front of the pack, are doing just that at the start of this race. Moses Kibet wearing the white t-shirt, and just tucked in behind him on the left of your screen is the larger runner Kachir of Morocco. And not far behind him, it looks like Mohamed Siani, also from Morocco, also wearing an orange shirt, is there as well in that lead group.
Yeah, Kibet there in that white vest is in fabulous form. On the 21st of April, what, a month or so ago, he ran a 59:58 half marathon. Anything under 60 minutes for a half marathon, it is really superb. So Kibet at 22 is a growing force. He's only run 28:26 for a 10K on the roads, but I suspect he's worth half a minute quicker than that, if not more. And he has absolutely got the bull by the horns, hasn't he? That's left a picture. He's blasted off and thrown the gauntlet down to the rest of them, and this is unusual. I mean, they've been running for just 2.5 minutes, and it's almost single file.
Yeah, and there's only 6 of them. Already a pack of 6 men has broken away from the rest of the field, and you can see there's a significant gap between them and the remainder of the field.
Yeah, no, this is honest running from Kibet, and very different to the ladies' race, where there's a pack of about 10 or 12. They're spread across the road, about 6 wide, as you can see there to right of picture in that lead women's shot. But Kibet here has taken it to the ladies, and he's obviously got that gender challenge victory in mind. And as you mentioned, Mark, it's 5 wins to the women, 4 to the men. I think maybe it was Manny Rodriguez who said that.
Yeah.
He's trying to even the score.
There you go. Yeah, it's been run 9 times, this gender challenge at Ottawa Race Weekend, and they've tried every year to calibrate the time gap perfectly to make it a real race so that it's close. And they've been very successful some years. It's come right down to the wire. And this year, 3 minutes and 40 seconds. But as Tim mentioned, 5 wins for the women and 4 for the men. So it'll either be more decisive lead for the women, or we'll be tied again. But right now we have a group of really just, well, it's down to, it is still 6 men. It's still 6 men at the front of the pack, a much larger group of women leading the field at the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend.
To the right of that men's group in the orange, as we look at it, is the small figure of Mohamed Siani. He won here back in 2016 in 28:37. That was on that very, very warm evening, and that was his first ever race outside of Morocco. And the 26-year-old obviously has got a liking for Ottawa. He won the Guangzhou Marathon in China back in early December in 2:10. He's a prolific road racer. I mean, these guys, you've got to remember, are professionals. They run for their supper, so to speak, and you know, well, they deserve whatever monies they get, because distance running at elite level is a pretty unforgiving sport. If you don't put in the effort, if you don't put in the blood and guts and tears through training month after month, you're not going to get anything out of it. It's not like a sport where there's a more obvious skill, be it baseball, hockey, cricket, you name it. This is pretty raw stuff. But Siani there, just tucked in behind Kibet, who is, I guess at the moment, Mark, acting like an unofficial pacemaker for that men's pack.
Yeah, look at the form on Kibet. He's you can tell he's really pushing.
He is, yeah, he's very barrel-chested, isn't he?
Yeah.
Interesting arm carriage. The arms are really high up across his chest. Kibet in that white vest there. You compare that with the athlete to the left of picture, just trying to see who that is to the left in the orange. That's another of the Kenyans. I think that might be Wilfred Kimitai. And his arms much, much lower than Kibet, who's almost sort of punching the air across the front of his chest.
So the women have been running for just over 9 minutes, the men just under 6. So the women have traveled about 3 kilometers, the men about 2. We expect the men will be in under 30 minutes, of course, and the women just over 30 minutes. As all of this is going on, various waves of the 10K are going off. The runners are seeded by their previous race times and their expected result. And so they stagger the start a little bit just to spread the runners out on the course so it doesn't get too congested. And so you can see there, well, there was somebody with some sort of animal gear on, almost like a mascot. There they are, thousands of amateur runners fulfilling a goal, ticking a box.
And you know what's great, Mark, is that so many of them are running for charity. You know, it's a monstrous deal back in the UK. You know, the London Marathon, for example, they reckon about 75% of the 42,000 in the London Marathon, so around 30,000 run for a charity of some kind. Hundreds and hundreds of good causes benefit, and I'm sure that's the case here, and it will be a growing force as well, as it is in so many other places.
So we know that in the elite men's field, leading the way, Moses Kibet, and in that pack as well, Mohamed Siani, Wilfred Kimitai, and Abdurmani Kashir. We know all of those runners are in that group of, looks like it's now 5 runners, 3 orange vested runners and 2 in white. And on the women's side, we've got a field of about 8 that are leading the way.
Yeah, the women's race very different to the men's, and they haven't really hit the straps yet. They're just beginning to wind it up. I think Natasha Lodac is in there, second to right in that women's group. I don't know if we can see that clearly enough, but the women's race, yeah, they're just beginning to get moving, and they've been running for nearly 11 and a half minutes. So I think the gender challenge at the moment is swinging towards the men. It's in favour of the men catching ladies at the moment, although actually that 3 minutes 40 is slightly generous in favour of the ladies. I think I was told that it means the men to catch the ladies have got to run around 28 minutes flat, and the ladies to keep the men at bay have to run around 32 minutes flat. But 28 minutes for a man is a good deal tougher than 32 minutes for a woman, with all due respect. Might be a lot of ladies listening who know they're running who disagree with me.
Yeah, if you look at the personal best times of the main runners in each field, you'd think that it'd be more likely for the women's group to break 32 than for a significant number of men to break 28.
No, absolutely, especially on the roads where you expect times to be slower than on the track. You know, track racing in spikes, when you've got constant feedback from your lap splits and so on, is always a few seconds quicker than on the roads. That said, there are some athletes who are just naturally born road racers, and they prefer the rhythm of the road surface and the fact that they haven't got to be making those 2 turns every quarter mile or so, and have personal bests quicker on the roads than they do on the track. Interesting that Kimitai to the left of picture in that men's race has moved up alongside Kibet to the right, the pair of them sharing the burden of pushing the tempo at the moment. We are down to 5 athletes, Siani and Kachir tucked in. The Moroccans at the moment almost sort of using the Kenyans as pacemakers. But Mark, you know, if you go out hard in a race, track or road race, and you're at the front, you've got to just tell yourself you are hurting the others. You're not giving them an easy ride, you're hurting them.
And you can see the men's leaders are now passing some of the women who went off in the elite women's field. So they're just catching some of the women at the back of the elite women's pack. So they're starting to reel in some of the lead women after only 10 minutes of running. But that doesn't necessarily mean they'll catch all of them. It just means they'll catch some of them. So we can see that it's Mohamed Rada El Arabi, who is the other runner in the group of 5, and really these are the 5 we expected to be competing for the title here.
Yes, they are. Yeah, El Arabi is in the white vest towards the back of the group there, well, center of the group now. Very powerfully built for a distance runner, actually, the 29-year-old Moroccan. He's run 27.58, so again under that magical 28-minute barrier for the 10K on the roads. That was in Valencia back in January, so it suggests he's had a great winter. He is a road specialist. He's run just outside 60 minutes for a half marathon, and he's strong too. He's run 2:09 for a full marathon with pretty good track speed. So El Arabi there looks pretty relaxed, doesn't he? The guy second to right in the white vest, just cruising along. I sense that the pace has slackened a little bit. Maybe it's time for one of this trio of Moroccans to come through and put in a stint at the front to keep the pace honest for the men.
At this point in the race, are you thinking about the other runners next to you, or are you just focused on running your best and running your time?
You shouldn't be. I think if you're in contention for the win, then certainly for the first 2/3 of a 10K, be it a 10,000 on the track or a 10K on the roads, you need to be pretty comfortable. You need to be knowing that the pace is hard, that it's honest, but operating within a sort of comfort zone. And then once you get past 2/3 distance, let's say 7K, then you can begin to get your head down, grit your teeth and grind it out. And if that last 8 or 10 minutes actually really hurts, you can manage that. I think sometimes it's very difficult if it's whatever road distance you're running. If you get to halfway and you're suffering, you're going to have a bad day at the office.
It looks like Wilfred Kimitai of Kenya is now slightly ahead of Moses Kibet, his countryman, at the front of the pack. They're the 2 leaders at this point, but Kimitai might be an inch or 2 in front of Kibet at this point. The 2 of them at the front of a group that also includes Mohamed Siani of Morocco, Abdurrahmani Kachir of Morocco, and Mohamed Reda El Arabi of Morocco. So the 2 Kenyans in front, the 3 Moroccans right behind them at this stage of the 10K. We're about 12 minutes into the men's race. You can see they are passing some of the elite women's field, but the lead women are still in front of the elite men in this gender challenge. There's a look at that group of women who are now on Bronson, and they're going to cross the canal, get back down onto the Queen Elizabeth side of the canal, and start running towards the finish line. It's still several kilometers to go until the finish, but they will be heading in that direction very shortly. You'll see here that they're making a turn away from Bronson. Many runners who are familiar with this route will know that they're kind of going in the reverse direction from how the course has been run in the past, and that's because of the different start location due to construction in downtown Ottawa. But now the women are heading towards the canal again, and they'll soon be making another left turn onto Queen Elizabeth Drive, and from there will be a winding but consistent road back to downtown Ottawa and directly to the finish line.
Well, the ladies are still too bunched for my liking, Mark. That suggests they're running tactically. You know, the chances of, how many of them are there? 6, 7 of them in that pack?
Might even be 8.
The chances of them all being an identical stage of fatigue with 17 and a half minutes on the clock are very small, and that's because they ran at least the first 10 minutes very conservatively. That may lead to the men winning this gender challenge. They're still pushing really hard, the 5 fellas out of picture, but the ladies, well, I don't think they've cranked it up enough yet. There's one athlete beginning to peel off the back of the ladies group, but the men running aggressively. They're sharing the pace. Siani now, left of picture, has in the orange vest, has just moved up alongside the two Kenyans, is trying to put in some effort, and we'll bring his splits as quickly as we can. We're working on that, but just what I'm seeing in front of my own eyes tells me that the men are closing on the ladies pretty quickly. I really was expecting Perez Jepchirchir to have pushed the pace earlier in the women's race and use the full distance, make it a proper 10k race as opposed to easing through the first 3 or 4 kilometers, then maybe getting her head down. Because of her strength as a half marathon runner, she would want to make every kilometer count.
Now you can see the men are making that same turn we showed you the women making just a couple of minutes ago, turning off of Bronson Avenue and heading back towards the Rideau Canal, where they will make another turn onto Queen Elizabeth Drive. It continues to be Kimitai in the lead with Kibet right next to him, El Arabi in there as well. Again, you notice the difference between the running styles of Kibet and Kimitai. Kimitai looks more relaxed. I don't know if that means anything in the end, but he looks more relaxed than Kibet at this point in the race.
Yeah, Kibet, I mean, as we've alluded to already, you know, he's got this strange running style, and El Arabi just hitting the front there for the first time. I think it's about the first point in the whole race, Mark, for the men, and they've been running 15 and a half minutes. That there hasn't been a Kenyan at the front there. So good to see these Kenyans and Ethiopians and Moroccans sharing the workload. But this is a critical stage for the men. 15, almost 16 minutes into the men's race. They've passed halfway. They have got to really work this third quarter if they're to catch the ladies. This is critical, this next 4 or 5 minutes for the men.
Almost 20 minutes into the women's race, and still a pack of about 6 runners leading the women's field. And we're just over 16 minutes into the men's race. And there's a group of 5 runners that has been together consistently from the start. And all 5 of them were among the favorites for this race. So you can see they are continuing to pass some of the elite women's field. Some of the women at the back of that pack, they're just coming underneath the Bronson Road Bridge again. And
Siani beginning to impose himself on this.
Go.
This is impressive. Remember back in December, ran that quick marathon in China. He's got very modest track times, but he's really working this one. He's run 4 marathons with that personal best of 2:09. He's focused on marathon training recently, but he did say at the press conference yesterday his preparation has gone really well for this since that marathon in December. He loves his racing. He's run 15 half marathons in the last 4 years. You know, that's nearly 4 per year. That is really hitting it hard.
And he is the 2016 champion here in Ottawa, of course, and there were some very difficult conditions for that race. First of all, he had trouble getting here. There were passport issues, and so he was delayed in arriving in Ottawa. Now you're seeing the men having to kind of reconfigure a little bit and choose which side of some of the women to go around here. So they're weaving in and out of some of the women that they're catching and going around them on different sides, and that may have shaken up the men's race a little bit, but continues to be Siani in the lead. He won in a time of 28:37 in 2016 on a warm and humid night. His personal best 27 minutes 28 seconds. So he's gone much faster than the time that it took to win the race in 2016.
He was 4th here last year, Siani, so it looks to me like he's come back here in better shape, Mark. He was 4th in 28:23 last year. But he has run 27:28, although that was in Casablanca, back in Morocco, when the course was not measured correctly, and I understand the times are about a minute quicker than they really should have been in that race. So his genuine personal best, I think, is 28:21.
You can see the women's field is thinned out now. It's turned into a race among 3 women at the front of the pack, and it's very difficult to tell who it is who is in that group. But I think Perez Jepchirchir is the one who is in the lead at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's whittled down very quickly, hasn't it? That suggests that somebody has cranked it up pretty viciously, Mark, because literally in about 3 minutes, that little that field of 6 or 7 ladies, which was looking a little too comfortable for 20 minutes and more, has been ripped apart by this surge, and maybe that's the decisive move which will stop the men catching the ladies. 23 minutes on the clock for the ladies. If they've got to run, let's say 32 minutes, they've got 9 minutes to go. The men closing all the time, but it's going to be very tight indeed, I sense.
All of it will be decided in the next 8 or 9 minutes here. The women already 23 minutes into their 10K race. The men 19 minutes and 45 seconds, so just under 20 minutes. Still 5 men battling for the lead, trading positions every few hundred meters or so. We can see on the men's side that Moses Kibet is pushing towards the lead again. Siani is up there along with Kimitai. And in the women's race, it looks like it's now come down to these 2 runners. There's a 3rd runner in behind, but starting to fall back a little bit.
Yeah, Valerie Jamali it is who leads that women's race there.
That is Jamali, yeah.
To write a picture. And Jamali is a 31:07 athlete, and that was in Kenya at altitude back in December 2017. She's better known as a marathon runner, very strong athlete. She's run 2:20 for the marathon. That was the 3rd place in Berlin a couple of years ago. The course, which is known as the quickest marathon circuit in the world. And as a marathon runner, well, she is special. She's won 5 of her last 8 marathons, and she is making this, albeit over the last third of that women's 10K. She's making it a real test of strength here, so I admire this big surge from Valerie Jamali, the 27-year-old.
And it's Dorcas Kimeli who is in 2nd, or right next to her, really. Those are the 2 runners who are now leading the women's 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend. So it's not Perez Jepchirchir as had been expected. I'm sure she was in that larger group. But everybody except these 2 runners has fallen back now. And with just a few minutes to go in the 10K, it is 2 Kenyans who are leading the way for the women. Meanwhile, on the men's side, we have a group of 5 runners, including 3 Kenyans and 2 Moroccans.
Now, what's kind of ironic is the pictures we're looking at now, Mark, with the men bunched together. You could almost throw a blanket over this group of 5 men.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that one of them needs to throw the gauntlet down and kick hard here with, what, 21 or nearly 22 minutes on the clock for the men. They've only got about 6 minutes of running to go. The ladies, likewise. If the men are going to catch the leading ladies, they've got to really kick in hard here. They're into what is effectively almost the last mile for them, perhaps 4, maybe 5 laps of a running track. And this is where they've got to change gear as they catch Hoover up Setlak, one of the leading Canadians. This is where they're critical, this next minute or 2, where somebody from that men's pack has got to push on to close on the leading pair of ladies. But I do sense that they're running so hard, Kimeli and Jamali, the 2 Kenyans out in front, that maybe they're going to stay clear. Dorcas Kimeli is made a big improvement last year. Ran 68 minutes for a half marathon back in March, so she's clearly in very good shape, the 22-year-old. She's by some margin the youngest of the 2.
The men's field has started to turn it on a little bit, and that group is now spread out into a bit of a line, a single file with Siani, the Moroccan, at the front. It's 3 Moroccans and 2 Kenyans in this group of 5 runners, but it looks like Moses Kibet has fallen off the back of the pack. So it is at the front of this group, Siani and Kashir and Al Arabi, who are the 3 leading men's runners in the 10K. Meanwhile, on the women's side, it continues to be a battle for first between Valerie Jamali and Dorcas Kimeli.
I just wonder whether Siani can do any more here. He's run really hard. He took the lead a few minutes ago, around 20 minutes into the race, and is pushing on hard. It is interesting, and this is an unusual situation, Mark. See 3 Moroccans easing away from the brace of Kenyans. And I must say, I feel for Moses Kibet, who did so much of the early work in this race, but he's dropped back into 5th place now. And the taller of the 3 Moroccans now pushing to the front, Kachir.
The women's runners are now north of the Pretoria Bridge in downtown Ottawa, so they are heading into the final stretch of the Ottawa 10K towards the finish line for all of the races here this weekend. It is one finish line for the 2K, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, and kids marathon. And the women are now pushing towards that. Kimeli and Jameli, both Kenyans, side by side, heading down the final stretch of the Ottawa 10K. Meanwhile, on the men's side, it continues to be Mohamed Siani of Morocco with a slight lead on Mohamed Breda El Arabi of Morocco. And it looks like Abdurrahmani Kachir has dropped back a little bit. He's in 3rd place. So the men are pushing now, and they're approaching this stretch just north of the Pretoria Bridge. You can see the area of the Pretoria Bridge just behind them, and they're now going under the Queensway, Highway 417 here in Ottawa, passing more of the elite women as they do. And you get another look at the elite women going by, one of our vantage points. And it is Valerie Jameli with a slight lead on Dorcas Kimeli. But it's close in the women's race.
Yeah, they're
pushing
working
each other
together.
here.
I mean, they're helping each other, I guess, Mark, stay clear of the men. The men are gradually hunting them down, and, you know, the 3 Moroccans are working so hard to try and close that gap. But they are really tanking along now, these 2 ladies, and you can see Kimeli and Jameli both working very, very hard. And I think now they're racing each other. For about the last 5 minutes, they've been helping each other. But now there's a bit of daylight between them. They're in single file, and I think that's Jameli, is it, who has hit the front? Valerie
Jameli is slightly ahead, with Dorcas Kimeli just behind her. And it won't be long now before we'll begin to see them from the finish line.
Well, Jameli is running her first 10K outside of Kenya. She's more of a marathon runner and looking very strong here. And Diwa, that is. Moving to Stacey and Diwa, the 26-year-old. She's run 31:27 at altitude. She's a very, very quick athlete and a quick half marathon runner as well. But she's in the wake of Kimeli and Jameli. They have run supremely strongly this last 10 minutes or so, Mark, and if they do stay clear of the men, they will have earned it.
We're just at a point in the race, of course, where all of the vehicles that are leading the runners have to get off the course to allow them to finish the race, and our cameras in the backs of those vehicles are no longer able to provide the same kinds of pictures. But now we have, from a fixed camera position near the finish line, we have sight of Valerie Jameli leading the women to the finish. Just over 30.5 minutes now, and she's turning it on towards the finish line. Dorcas Kimeli, also of Kenya, is chasing her down, and I don't think the men are going to catch these women. And now it's turning into a race between Kimeli and Jameli.
Wow,
Dorcas Kimeli really trying to turn it on here, and she's taken the lead. Kimeli taking the lead and racing towards the finish line, pouring it on at the finish. Dorcas Kimeli of Kenya is the winner of the Ottawa 10K, with Valerie Kimeli, her compatriot, just behind her. And Kimeli wins not only the women's race, but also the gender challenge.
Well, the closing speed, Mark, was astonishing, because that winning time I got at 31:07. That is quick, considering they didn't really get working for the first 10 minutes or so.
And Kipkoech is in 3rd. And Diwa in 4th place. And we're waiting now for the top man to come across the finish line. It looks like it will be Mohamed Siani of Morocco. Here he comes to the finish. Siani is the winner of the 10K at Ottawa Race Weekend. He bends to the ground. He kisses the ground, the wet ground here in Ottawa. And Kimitai is in second place.
Well, I got that winning time in the men's race at around 28:09, 28:10 unofficially. And Siani ran a very, very honest race, didn't he?
Kachir finishing third. Now we're waiting for the top Canadian woman.
Is that Natasha Lodac?
I think it is Natasha Lodac who is going to be the Canadian champion. There it is. No surprise to see Natasha Lodac coming across in 32.5 minutes. And she wins the Canadian Championship.
Yeah, I got Natasha there at 32.29. She's worked for that as Natasha. One of the problems, of course, for the athletes who get dropped early on in the race, and you will get dropped early on when the leaders are moving at 31-minute tempo, is that you must spend an awful lot of the race on your own mark, and that makes it doubly tough. Being solo, out on those roads, having to gauge your own effort with nobody around you.
And here comes Setlak in second place among Canadians and getting a hug from Natasha Lodac.
So Jessica O'Connell coming through. Good run from the 30-year-old.
Yeah. 33.23 unofficially for O'Connell.
Yeah, she's a 32.22 runner, Jessica O'Connell. She'll be maybe a little bit disappointed with that.
And there's Dylan Wieck winning the men's race. Dylan Wieck will be the Canadian men's champion this year. What a run for him.
Yeah, we've hardly mentioned
right around
Dylan.
30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan, is a great athlete in his time. He's 35 now, and, he has run 28.12 on the track, which probably equates to, 28.30. So around 30 minutes on the roads here today is a lot slower than he's run in the past, Dylan, but he's won that Canadian title, as you say, so he is national champion.
There are the Canadian champions, Dylan Wieck and Natasha Lodac. Dylan Wieck, of course, Canadian Olympic marathoner, one of that group of 3 men who finally qualified for the Olympics and were able to go to the Olympics after so many years without a Canadian man at the Olympics in the marathon, along with Reed Coulsett and Eric Gillis.
And he ran supremely in London 2012. He finished in 20th place on the streets of London on that crowded circuit in 2 hours 15. A great performance in an Olympic marathon for Dylan Wieck, and great performance today.
Yeah. And Dylan Wieck has turned his attention to coaching. He's moved to Ottawa, and he's had a real impact on so many runners that he leads and coaches and encourages and inspires. And so great to see him having such a great performance today. Again, not somebody that we were necessarily thinking of as among the certainly any race that Dylan Wieck is in, he's going to be a competitor, but he wasn't necessarily one of the favorites for the Canadian title this time around.
But he is a class act, and class is permanent, form is temporary, as they say. Dylan we know he's in good form. He won the Vancouver half back on the 10th of February in 66 minutes exactly. That's solid running, and if he's put in a bit of speed work over this last couple of months, then no wonder he's run pretty well today.
I caught a glimpse. It's so hard to keep track of everybody and what category they're in coming across the finish line, but Melindy Elmore of Canada, I think, may have finished second among the Canadian women, but she needed some medical attention right after she crossed the finish line. I don't know if she crossed ahead of Emily Setlak or just behind her, but we'll get the official results on that. But I hope she's okay. She did need some immediate attention after crossing the finish line.
If she was second, that's a great run from Melindy Elmore.
Yeah.
I mean, she's 39 years old. Natasha was the Canadian champion, 37 years old. It's a day for the more experienced athletes, let's say.
And from our vantage point here, we turn around. We're about 20 yards past the finish line. On your screens, when you see the finish line, you see people powering to the finish, showing great strides, really strong finishes. 20 yards past the finish line, you see people either walking slowly or bending over, gasping for breath. Some of them perhaps even throwing up or falling to their knees because of how hard they have been running. So we get to see, just past the finish line, this spot where there's as much agony as there is glory.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of satisfaction through the pain, Mark. I think I was more one of the latter group. You know, I used to finish and be a bit of a wreck after my races. I always envied people who could cross the line, punching the air, leaping in the air, and jogging past the finish line looking comfortable.
Here comes the rain. It has just started to pour at the finish line. So it's raining very heavily. And there's an amateur runner who has just crossed the finish line in a terrific time. Anybody who's under 40 minutes on the women's side or under 35 minutes on the men's side has had a great run. But just an example of where your mind is at the finish. This runner sprinted across the finish line, staggered over to the side where there's a little grassy area, fell to the ground, really just stumbled and fell to the ground, and then reached over and pressed the stop button on his watch to make sure he got his time his time recorded accurately. So that's where a runner's mind is at the end of a 10K race.
Well, you know, these guys, the vast majority of athletes of this caliber coming through now, the men on 34 minutes, the women on 38, they will run every day. Many of them will run 10 times a week, and plenty of them twice a day. You know, the top echelon are training twice a day. So it's an entire lifestyle, Mark. And you know very well yourself as a good marathon runner that, you know, it can dominate your life to the point where you almost have to live this monastic attitude. You have to, you know, when you're watching your diet, your hours of sleep, how you sit at the office, what massages you get, what treatment you get.
Everything in your life becomes about what it means for the marathon, right? For the race.
That's the satisfaction, isn't it? You know, everything channeled into it, and the conduit is when you get to race day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's hear from Dylan Wieck, the Canadian champion in tonight's Ottawa 10K.
Tanya, come in here for a second. You were just talking about how amazing this is.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. I live in Ottawa now, so hometown race. I felt the crowd out there for sure. Yeah.
Was that, you know, what propelled you over the finish line to win?
I just really wanted it today. I mean, it's...
I want a lot of things some days, but it doesn't happen.
Canadian championships are, they don't come often. I've been doing this for a long time and maybe won 3 or 4 over the span of 15 years. So when that opportunity is there, or like it was with 200 to go, I just had to jump on it.
Yeah, Tanya, you were saying that you really admire.
Dylan, you're known more as a marathoner, perhaps.
I am, yeah.
What did you do differently here to get ready for this 10K?
I did try to work on a little bit of speed, but you know, I don't do a lot of speed anymore. I'm just kind of trying to prepare more for half marathons, and this just kind of fit in. It was good. It was a good, hard race.
Great. Are you going to use it to prepare for maybe a fall marathon or something like that? Make a comeback there?
I hope so. First things first, the Canadian Half Marathon Championships in Winnipeg. And then hopefully from there we can see where I can go.
And you made it in before the skies open up, which they're about to do. So we're going to try and find Natasha. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well.
Dylan Wieck, congratulations to him. Really nice guy, a real gentleman of the sport, and a guy who deserves the win and has represented Canada so well internationally, including at the Olympics in the past. You continue to see many of the runners who are now approaching the finish line. I have to say, as somebody who has run probably almost every distance at this event and in other races as well, I admire the 10K runners because you know, the 10K demands a certain pace that is very difficult to sustain for that length of time. A 5K race is over quickly. A half marathon requires that you slow down a bit because you can't sustain a fast pace for the length of a half marathon, and the same with a marathon. The 10K seems to be that intersection between a grueling pace and a longer distance. And so that's why you see these runners collapsing at the finish line after they've run so hard.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think specialists of every distance, Mark, on track and road racing claim their event is the hardest, and it's got those special factors, special qualities. And to an extent, that's true, because if you focus on it and train specifically for it, you go into zones of discomfort that others never get to experience. So I don't know what it's like to be a 100-meter sprinter or a 400-meter sprinter. So I can't diss the pain that they go through. I have heard that sprinters can actually be crying because of the pain in their buttocks from lactic acid, you know, and you don't experience that as a distance runner. But yeah, you're right, 10K is where you have to do quite a lot of speed work, you have to do an awful lot of strength work, so it's kind of that meeting ground of track speed and marathon strength.
Yeah, but I think the experience of running a 10K, certainly I would have to say it's my least favorite distance from that perspective, because you have to sustain for a long period of time a red line kind of pace where you feel at any moment like you must stop. And you can't.
And in a
must
marathon at halfway, let's say, you can be pretty comfortable, but clearly you like the drawn-out pain of a marathon. You're that kind
exactly.
of a guy.
Yeah. It's not to say there aren't times in a marathon where your body is demanding you to stop, but it never feels like you're about to go over the edge, that it's completely unsustainable. Look, we're looking at a picture now of a guy who just stopped and has started running again. All right, Natasha Lodac is the Canadian women's champion in the 10K. Let's hear from her.
You did it! We talked at the news conference. How do you feel?
I'm so happy. I mean, I've been second 4 times in a row. So I've got to say it's a bit of a relief. I mean, I've always had the fastest time coming in, but I've never been able to actually win. Yeah. So I'm really excited everything came together, and I just felt good out there. So
what was the magic today? I mean, I know you've been training really well, and you did the altitude training, right?
I don't think there was any magic. I just think I was more confident today, and I went out with the Africans, and I believed that I belonged up there, and I believed that I could race with the best in the world. And when you have that mentality, it really goes a long way. And then just trying to hold on as long as I could, and then it was hard. I fell off quite a bit, but I never gave up, and I just kept pushing right to the end. So okay. I'm really happy.
So now what?
Now we celebrate.
Okay. We're going to celebrate.
Now we have some wine tonight. And my coach is here. She was out on the course, and I could hear every word she was saying. And sometimes it's the simplest thing is just breathe.
Well, I know Tanya and I, we let out a big whoop when we saw you go across. We're like, she did it. So congratulations.
Thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Natasha Lodac, the Canadian women's champion in the 10K here at Ottawa Race Weekend. Congratulations to her. She's a terrific ambassador for the sport, and I like what she said there. I believed that I could race with the best in the world. So her goal was to stay with that elite group of international runners for as long as possible. She didn't stay with them for the whole race, but she managed to sustain a pace that got her the Canadian championship.
Well, I guess she came in confident, Mark. After that track 10,000 in California 3 weeks ago, 31:43. She knew she could hang with the best of the Africans for a while, and that actually probably drew her away from the rest of the best Canadians. So that's a great run from Natasha. In the last 3 years, I know she said she's been 4th in the Canadian Championships for the last second for the last 4 years, but the last 3 times here she's been 6th, 7th, and 7th. Haven't got confirmation yet of her position overall here today, but she's put in another really strong performance, and she's a prolific racer. This is her 8th race of 2019, so she loves to get out there and test herself.
Seeing more of the amateur runners coming across the finish line now in the Ottawa 10K. They're about 41 minutes into the race, 41 and a half minutes for all of these runners, most of whom would have been part of the first wave. And look, that's still a really strong time in a 10K race. Many of these runners will be completing personal bests, many of them running a 10K for the first time in their lives. We're seeing some young people, some very young runners cross the finish line, all of them getting drenched by the rain that has opened up since the elite runners crossed the finish.
That's the great thing about 10K, Mark. It's user friendly.
Yeah.
I like to say that a marathon is every man's Everest. It's a tougher challenge as you can get, pretty much. Whereas a 10K is achievable. It's base camp of Everest, and that in itself is pretty tough to get to, but sure, it's achievable. So good for all these guys and gals, and some youngsters, some real youngsters out there racing this 10K, some tiny kids.
Yeah, there are some kids who look to be, 10, 11, 12 years old doing the 10K. Good for them. Good to see some young people out running. But again, many of these runners now getting soaked by the rain. We had been warned about the prospect of rain throughout the days leading up to Ottawa Race Weekend. We were told there would be a lot today, and there has not been. until now. This is really the heaviest rain that we've seen all day today, and unfortunately it's coming as many of the runners are still out on the course, but it will not have affected the elite race today. Again, to recap, Dorcas Kameli, the winner on the women's side and the winner of the gender challenge as well. And on the men's side, Mohamed Siani of Morocco is the winner, the Canadian women's champion. Natasha Lodac, Dylan Wieck's taking the men's title. And now let's hear from Mohamed Siani, the champion of the Ottawa 10K.
Well, congratulations. What was the magic today?
الفرحة ديالي الحمد لله أنا سعيد بهذا الفوز ديالي المرة الثانية والحمد لله أنا فرحان بزاف بهذه النتيجة، وهذه النتيجة ما كانتش عن طريق الصدفة، كانت عن طريق عمل واستعدادات اللي كنقوم بها بمدينة الرباط، والحمد لله أنا زيد فرحان بزاف.
He said he's very happy about the second victory. And this victory today was done because he had a very hard training for it, and this is very happy about his second winner.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to let you celebrate.
He's getting married next.
You're getting married. Congratulations on that too. It's a big month.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations to Mohamed Siani of Morocco, the winner of the 10K. And though he and the other men were running very strong, they never did catch the women. We did say at the outset that the gap of 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Tim, probably did give the women a slight advantage, that the men were going to have to run pretty fast to catch them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Manny Rodriguez, the elite athlete director, will have worked out that 3 minute 40 gap. But I thought it was a little bit favourable to the ladies to before the race, and I still think that. I think it's probably 20-30 seconds in favour of the ladies, and it wasn't close, frankly, was it? Even though we saw the men running really hard, and the ladies a very, very relaxed first half.
Yeah, it looked that way anyway. It's hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, it's you can't really, unless you see them running side. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, you did right.
You can't see how fast they're running. You can't really gauge the effort, except I know you from watching lots and lots of races. You can see by the cadence and the arm movements and so on. You can often tell from that. But in this case, even though it looked like the women were not pushing it as hard as we expected at the start, and there was a significant group of them in the first half of the race, they ended up taking the gender challenge, and it wasn't even close.
And what will tell the truth, of course, is the splits when we get them. And unfortunately, we weren't able to bring any splits for the 5K even or in each race, but that will tell the story. I do get the impression that last 2 or 3 kilometres in the women's race was incredibly quick. I think they really put the hammer down, and that's what kept them clear of the men. But for that, I think we might have seen it much, much closer.
It is raining heavily now at the finish line at Ottawa Race Weekend, and it's really pouring. So for all of the runners who are now crossing the finish line, it's not the ideal conditions, but I always say it's better when it starts to rain after I've started running than before, right? You're much better off if you're already underway when the rain starts to fall than if you have to go out and run after it started pouring.
Absolutely. These runners, they're in the home straight. They're all warm. They've been running for 45 minutes or whatever it is. Yeah, 46 minutes. They're nice and warm now. This is probably quite a nice little dousing for them. It's not. Had this been the case 10 minutes before the start mark, we'd have seen 8,000 people drenched and pretty miserable for a lot of the race in that respect. But no, this is okay. This is fine.
Yeah. And they would have had to start the race by standing at the start line in the pouring rain. We're joined now by John Halverson, who is the race director for Ottawa Race Weekend and the president of Run Ottawa. This is John's final time in that position because he has stepped away for a new job. So John, after 2 decades of playing a significant role in this event as a volunteer and as an executive, we welcome you to our coverage, and thank you for all you've done for this event over the last 20 years.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Are you happy with how it's gone today, apart from the weather?
Well, the weather, as you guys were just saying, the weather was great. up until just about 10 minutes ago or less, so we got all the races off without really any heavy rain, just a little drizzle, and it's been actually quite cool and perfect for running. So this is, like you said, a nice little shower at the end, and hopefully people will find a towel pretty quick and be happy with the day,
Yeah. You're Norwegian. You're used to this sort of weather. I mean, you were brought up in Norway. This is nothing for you. Used to sunbathe in this stuff.
Well, yes, that's true. But, I mean, we're talking about Canadians here, Tim. Not Brits either.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, there's certainly this weather would not be unusual in Britain, of course. A little bit of rain.
I've got to fight this myth. You know what? It's been beautiful back in the UK for the last few days, so I'm going to have to
I spent 2 weeks there last summer, and it rained a total of 5 minutes. The entire 2 weeks
there you
I was
go.
there.
Last summer was a freak summer.
Yeah.
Whole of Europe.
But John, let's talk about this weekend in total, because in addition to the 10K, of course, we've had the 5K and the 2K today. We have the half marathon, and kids marathon tomorrow. There are people participating in multiple event challenges as well.
Yeah.
So just tell us how you're feeling about everything.
Well, so far, I mean, things have been going really well. We were a little excited about running on Cartier Street in here because of the Golden Triangle area with Elgin Street being under construction.
Yeah.
It was challenging.
That has been a big part of the story this year, is the fact that you've had to make adjustments.
Right.
We haven't had a lot of time to talk about it, but there's a significant amount of construction in downtown Ottawa. Elgin Street, a good portion of it is closed, and that's a big part of the route, particularly for the 10K typically. And then for tomorrow, there's a bridge across the Ottawa River called the Chaudière Crossing, and because of the high water levels, there's been for those people who don't know, there's been a significant amount of flooding in the Ottawa area, unprecedented spring rain, highest water levels in a century in some parts of the Ottawa River, and because of that they had to close the Chaudière Crossing. So that's a part of the marathon and half marathon route, and you had to make some last minute adjustments because of that.
Absolutely. We knew about the Elgin Street for a long time. I mean, that was all winter. It was known, and we were making those plans, but the Chaudière Bridge with the flooding in the Ottawa River was perhaps not a surprise. We had this a few times. The water level's been high, but the bridge was being actually touched by the water from below, and it's a lot of water. It's quite amazing. And we made the plans about 2 weeks ago that we're not going to wait and find out at the last minute, because we have to measure the course and get it all certified and sanctioned and all that. So that was key.
But in 20 years, John, you must have had so many challenges. Each year, different things come up and test you, and it's just dealing with those. Right. But I'm curious as to what is the main change you've seen in the last 20 years? How is it just the scale of the event? What is the main change that you've seen?
Well, the scale of the event is absolutely one thing. When I started, it was about 10,000 runners, and we grew up to well into the 40s for a short period of time. It's settled down a little bit now with the around 30, 33 or whatever we were going to be this year officially. But it's important to look at that component, but also the elite athlete component, because we've had elite athletes that are quite good in the last number of years. I mean, I ran this thing in '88 and won by I don't know how much, and now
28 minutes and 12 seconds, right?
Yeah, it was the 28-12 that stood for a long time, but that was not what it is today. And today, I don't know, 28-12 still placed me pretty high, I think, in this today. I don't know what the winning time was, around 27:50-ish.
What was the winning time?
I scribbled it down here. I got 28:10, 28:10,
so 2 seconds
just outside. Yeah, exactly. The virtual John Halverson.
I ran by myself,
right there.
just to point that out.
Yeah, we should. There should be a hologram of you running the course that we can superimpose.
Yeah, there you go.
And people can race against that. Yeah.
So but. Yeah, the elite athlete component is definitely a huge change to have that, and it's elevated the event for sure. I mean, it's what makes the event unique for us in Canada, I think.
What will you miss, John? I mean, I've got my own event back in the UK, and the team that was pulled together for race month and actually through the year is fantastic. Presumably, it's a lot of that camaraderie of the team and the thousands of volunteers that you will miss.
Well, yeah, but I'm happy. The team probably could use my support in some areas. Whether I jump into the truckers group or the elite athlete group, I don't know yet. But I sort of sense I'll be involved somehow. I love the event, I love the excitement, and if nothing else, there's the VIP tent, right?
Yeah, well, we'll be happy to have you involved in whatever capacity you choose going forward, John. Let's talk a little bit about what the plan is for tomorrow. Of course, we've got the marathon, then the half marathon as the main events. These are really signature events in our community. I think it's safe to say that, you know, they bring in so many people from outside the city. They fill hotel rooms. They bring out spectators. You know, people come out and watch the 10K, but I think there's a special thing about the Sunday morning of Ottawa Race Weekend when people in communities get out and support the runners. They set up water stations. They volunteer. They know their roads are going to be closed, and they support that and support the runners.
Yeah, I mean, that's what gives us a lot of notoriety in North America. At least we get lots of great comments about our crowds, and both myself and Jim Robinson rode in the women's elite car today, and you know, we've never done that before. Being to start on the other side, I said, well, I can either walk back or I can hop in the elite car. So I just hopped in the elite car and I got that experience, which was kind of neat because I'd never really seen it from that angle. I've done that in other races, but not in this race, and that was kind of fun. And lots of great crowds out there. And I know tomorrow for the marathon and the half marathon, you know, the downtown core, it's lined with people. Some quieter spots a little further out, but our neighborhoods really step out. I mean, that's the big thing. We get the neighborhoods out and cheering and making noise.
And that's been a part of a conscious effort to engage the various neighborhoods along the course. And
Absolutely.
Also in recent course reconfigurations, I know there's been more of an emphasis on having the race run through communities in Ottawa. Quite often in the past, the course would take people up and down this area along the canal, which is scenic and beautiful, but it's not touching people close to home, right? So when you run it through neighborhoods like Hintonburg and West Wellington and Westboro and that sort of thing, then you're more likely to be bringing people out to support the runners.
I like to say that you know, we have a beautiful city, lots of pathways and green space, great for training. But when you're racing, you want to be where there's lots of support, lots of spectators. So then we would like to go into the neighborhoods and also feature those neighborhoods, feature the community groups and the schools that are there, and get them out and engaged. And that's been a huge part of what we're doing. And really keeps the community engaged and I think supportive as well, because yes, there are road closures that we all need to manage around.
Do you feel as though the race is the finished article, John? Is purrs along as a smoothly running machine, or are there ways in which you would like to see it be taken over the coming 10 years, let's say this next decade?
Well, I would still like to see the marathon grow. I think Canada deserves a larger marathon. You know, we have a few in Canada, as you know, with the Toronto Waterfront and ourselves, both Scotiabank events. You know, we have some quality events in Canada, but we don't have any large events. And I think we need to get more Canadians running the marathon. I think that's the message there. But I think also, you know, our city is still growing up. You know, we know what's going on with the ZB project and LeBreton Flats, and you know, I can see us potentially using these areas either for start-finish areas or even just to go through, and I think they'll be nicer to go through once they finish. I mean, I have great hopes for those areas, and I think we'll hopefully get to benefit from that as a race as well.
The forecast for tomorrow morning, by the way, we're expecting it to be about 15 degrees at 7 a.m. when the marathon starts, and 17 degrees at 9 a.m. When many of the runners will be about halfway through. Not a lot of chance of precipitation in the forecast, so that actually sounds pretty good. We've had warmer mornings at Ottawa Race Weekend.
We absolutely have had warmer days. 15 is maybe a touch more than ideal, would you say, Tim?
Yeah.
I would say ideal is probably 10.
You're going to be picky.
But the other thing is the humidity can be a factor. We have to watch for that, and maybe some cloud cover late in the day anyway. It's sort of as we hit the mid-high point for the sun, if we can get a little bit of clouds, that really helps as well. Because the sun load at this time of year can be fairly significant.
Yeah, my ideal starting race temperature is between 8 and 10 degrees, I think, for a marathon. I like it to be a little bit cool.
Which is what it is pretty much every year in Berlin, for example, where Kipchoge set the world record last September. But, I mean, yeah, you're right. You know, 15 degrees, 16 degrees. It's at the upper end of the good zone.
Yeah.
And once you're getting up towards 17, 18, 19, then runners going to be doubly tested.
Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, that's the time when most of the average runners are out there for still a few hours. But we have a great support group out there. Let me just thank them while I'm at it, because with the water stations and the mister stations, we look after them well.
All right. Well, John, I know we'll have a chance to talk again tomorrow, I'm sure. But again, I want to thank you for all you've done for Ottawa Race Weekend over the last 20 years, including the last 6 in the full-time capacity as the president of Run Ottawa. Tim, it's been a great night. It's been an exciting race. And we're looking forward to more of that tomorrow. Tim will be joining us again on our coverage of the Ottawa Marathon, which begins tomorrow morning, Sunday morning at 6:30. We hope to see you then. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
You should expect to take the occasional fall when you are paddleboarding, so always have your tether attached. If you lose your balance, aim for the side so that you fall into the water. To get back on your board from the side, pull yourself aboard while remaining in the prone position. Once aboard, reorient yourself so that you're facing the front of the board. Then, using your paddle to brace yourself, get up to your knees and then stand.
If you want to do anything in television, here's the best place to do it because they're very hands-on. You see what goes on in the community that you might not normally see. They're people from our community, so they know and they have a heart for our community to step outside of our comfort zone and do more and learn more and take the opportunities, and then you can grow and use it. My name is Paul Bates, and I'm a volunteer at Rogers TV.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.